Hello you beautiful people, and more importantly, welcome back to the channel. Thank you ever so much for joining me in this latest episode of what will be a trilogy of the Zvezda 1/144 scale Boeing 757. Now for those that have been following on and watching attentively in part 1, you will know where we got up to, and that is basically we got the fuselage painted the white and the grey, and we're now ready to move forwards. We've done the chrome work on the tail, and now we're moving forwards, not mooning, I hope we're not mooning. We're moving forwards into wet sanding the fuselage to get it nice and smooth and glass-like. So to do this, as you saw then, I'm using what's a micro mesh sanding. I think we'll call it sanding cloths, because that's what they are. They're sanding cloths. They're basically various grades from sort of I think it's 5,000 up all the way around to 12,000 grit. So as you can imagine, it gets it pretty smooth. So as you can see in front of you, which has been sped up for viewer pleasure as always, it's just a case of cutting off small parts of those cloths in the various grades that you need, and then with the application of water, just sanding methodically in straight lines all over your painted area, and with some time and patience it will come up with a very nice smooth finish. If like me you sometimes your paint doesn't come down perfectly, or there's the odd blemish or a little bit of dust, that annoying little worm of dust, this will remove that and get it looking nice and glass like. Unfortunately my camera's slightly overexposed here. I do adjust that slightly, and please forgive the complimentary wobbly hand there. But I'm just trying to sort of point out to you and show you how smooth I've got this. It doesn't really work so well with the white, but you'll catch some nice glimpses on the grey fuselage belly there. Look, nice and glass-like. This helps the decals adhere very nicely to the paint. Well, I say that, but these decals weren't particularly great. But normally they will. It will help, you know, get the decal nice and smoothly down for that sort of painted-on look. So moving on. It's the first decal, and the first decal, as is fairly customary with me when I'm doing my airliner kits, is to do the cockpit glass. So for those new to it, we use a micro set and a micro sole solutions. Okay, now the micro set gets it to stick down nicely, so that's what we're applying here with a paintbrush. A clean paintbrush, I will add to that. But whatever you use is up to you, but I personally find using a paintbrush gets it on there nicely, as you can see. And then we apply the decal, which is quite a nice decal actually. It's got the pilots visible in it. Thinking of my words there, and it's printed on that. Like this part of the decaling was really nice, went on beautifully. But as I went through the kit, the other decals they were specialist decals, sort of ad hoc. The only one place you can get the decals that I'm doing for this aircraft. Now the guy does really well, he provides an excellent service, but for me I just couldn't get on with them, but I pressed on anyway because I wanted this particular scheme. But that's all I'm going to say on these decals. But as you can see, it sits down nicely, and with a nice cotton bud or Q-tip, depending on where you are from the world, we just push out all the liquid from behind, do some final adjustments. What is quite important to note is you need a white background for your cockpit glass, because the decals are translucent, so the white is the white, if you know what I mean. Excuse a close-up of my lovely hairy hand there. We will move on shortly, I promise. So next up will be the micro set, I believe. And what that will do when we get to that, and I'll show you the bottle very shortly, what that will do is it helps the decals sort of adhere really well to all the grooves and that, so that they have what they class as a painted on look. Now obviously we don't want a painted on look. There we go, the micro sole. It softens decals to conform to irregular surfaces. Now as you can see there, that's quite an irregular surface, so I use this just to help bed the decal down, and you can use this on all your decals. I've never known it not to work on any of them. You can get varying strengths with different makers. I do believe Tamiya do like super strong versions of this, and I believe out in the States there are different companies there that also do some really nice decal softening solutions for your thicker decals or your standard ones, whichever, you know, varying grades for how thick your decals actually are. Anyway, as you can see there, that's the cockpit window put in. This is why I blanked it off and painted over it, so I could use those decals just to see how they look. Okay, so it's on with the actual main fuselage decals, and I guess you probably know what this was going to be, but if I hadn't revealed it before, it's going to be United Airlines New York City colours. Now as I say, this decal provider is the only person that does this, so kudos to them for that. As I say, I personally found them a bit thick for my liking, but that could be down to my skill level. I don't know. or it could be they were just too thick, and that you get what you pay for, sort of thing. You know, the guy does his best. I'm by no means slating his work, but for me, I just found him a bit thick. So again, with the micro set, the paintbrush, and we'll just lay down some of that on the fuselage, like so, just so that it sits behind the decal and makes, you know, gets it to stick perfectly. The usual warm water, and then try and roughly aim up for where you want it to be, because it does save a bit of headaches later. You don't want it down the opposite end of the fuselage and have to shimmy it all the way down to where you want it. If you can roughly sort of line it up, then all well and good. Now, you may have noticed there that I actually cut that decal into two pieces. Now, this was because it's quite a large decal, it's covering a very large area, and I was aware that it isn't possibly going to fit so perfectly, so I wanted to just take it off in bite-sized chunks. It's just a case of lining up the other, where the ED is, to next to the T later on, so it's really not a labour-intensive thing to just pop that on next. As you can see there, being honest, the decal didn't fit the fuselage particularly well. I'm just being honest, okay, with my experience. So it did take quite a bit of wrangling to sort of get a, I don't know, maybe get a 7 out of 10 in the end, if I'm being honest with how I felt it looked. So as you can see there, both bits are together now, they've lined up, and you can see a bit of a split there under the D where I've had to cut it to get it to conform. It is what it is. Am I annoyed? I'm a little bit, what's the word? Disappointed, I think's the word, that they weren't perfect, because, yeah, I would have just like, listen, we're model makers. This is what we do, isn't it? We're perfectionists. But, however, am I pleased with it? And, you know, is it, you know, a good representative of the scheme? Absolutely. So just moving along, I'm not going to bore you with both sides of this, but I just thought I'd show you the progress of one side. These decals, I've split them into, I think it was 4 pieces, just to move along the fuselage and just pop them in place. A little bit of thumb work there. Some people don't use their fingers at all. I find them quite useful. Other people just use a Q-tip cotton bud, like so there, or tweezers, or sometimes I've even seen it with a pin just to move the decal along. The decal's actually laid down not too badly. They sort of stuck in place. Again, not looking too bad from here. It's going to be a good 3-foot model. You know, the 3-foot rule, if you stand 3 foot away, it looks pretty darn good. So I'm happy with that. I wanted to get this scheme. In hindsight, it is what it is. There we go, one side of the fuselage completed. It's quite an impressive scheme. This is actually a real scheme. If you go on various websites for aircraft photos, you will see that this aircraft actually does exist. In fact, I may pop my own photo on at the end just for your viewing pleasure, just to see what it actually looks like. Next up was the tail, and as you can see, I've already put the micro set down, so we can simply pop the decal on that side, allow it to sit nicely, and then we'll put some of the sole on afterwards to bring out some of the rudder detail, you know, really get the tail to fuse down into the details of the moulding. Again, as you can see, fitment details, it was too long for the tail. Again, I'm really not sort of digging this person, the maker, out, because they've done a damn sight better job than I could ever do in my wildest dreams. But there were fitment issues, if we're being honest about this, which did cause a few headaches, I'm not going to lie. I haven't shown all the sort of swearing and etc, etc, but obviously I had to get a very sharp knife once this had fully cured, I should add, so I gave it a good couple of days for that to settle in nicely before I then cut the lower bit of the tail. So next up is the kit comes with standard 757 winglets, which, such as the Iceland Air has, other various operators, but United actually operate the scimitars, I think is the word for it. So I actually grabbed the scimitars off now let me think about this, as another Zvezda kit, the Boeing 737-800, and I cut that tip that you can see to the left of my finger off the 737 winglet, because believe it or not, as you're about to see, it fits perfectly to the 757 winglet. Now I could have let this go because, okay, the decals weren't great, etc, but I did want to try and get a pretty good high level of accuracy and detail with this kit for what you can do with 1/144th scale, of course. So as you can see there, I used my razor saw, which is brilliant, and then I pinged the tip away, but luckily I managed to find it back, and it's just a case now of just lining it up to make sure my measurements were correct, that it does just go in line there. It was fiddly as hell, but you know, I just wanted that extra bit of detail. And just for posterity, there's a little bit of a close-up of my handiwork. So next up, it was a case of getting a little bit of super glue and just pinning them together like so. We'll move on to them and you'll see the finished product when we go to paint. So next up is the wheels, again using the Tamiya Excellence Extra Thin. Please make sure, again, I can't stress this enough, that you use the correct wheels for your variant, because there are 2 sets with this kit. So I double checked and we got the right wheels. So just dabbing the Tamiya Extra Thin on there, putting the brake hubs in before we apply the wheels over the top. A little bit fiddly, it's even more fiddly when you're filming it, but we get there in the end. A little bit of podging it down with the tweezers. So whilst I'm doing this, I just want to thank you all ever so much for subscribing, liking, messages of encouragement, etc. You guys have been fantastic. I do appreciate. This was meant to be a 2-month build, and I think I'm now tapping on a year since I started this. So yeah, it wasn't quite the palette cleanser I was expecting it to be. Again, the other side, just put in the brake drums in situ, and then it will be the wheels on next. Now, you with the eagle-eyed of you, or anyone with eyes actually, will notice that I have not completely painted the tyres there. I just did the centres while they were on the sprue there, just to make it easier. They're easier to handle, and then it was just a case of sanding away the seams on the wheels, and then in a little while I will paint the rest of the black, and then I just find it easier that way. Some people do it differently, but this is my style. And we're just getting the wheels in situ there. A little bit fiddly, like I say, but they come together nicely. And there you go, 1 set of main landing gear for a Boeing 757. And there we go, in focus. The finished wheel set. Okay, moving on swiftly. The next set, the next part of the build was to paint the wings. So here we go, a little bit of aqueous hobby colour, grey, and Mr. colour as well, just for your reference. I did a little bit of a mix of those to get the Boeing wing grey correct. Okay. I've sped this up for you because I'm trying to make this informal but also not too tedious. So it's just a case of build up of layers like we normally do with everything else. Just slowly building up the colour levels. Don't blast it on. I think I said this in the last video, but if you're just joining us fresh with this one, don't blast it on. Build it up in layers and you'll find your life will be much easier and happier. So with the wings painted, next up it was the United Airlines blue. So I found Mr. Hobby number 5 was the closest match. In fact, I can't see any real difference. I'm sure the purists out there may find a difference, but anyhow. So it was painting those scimitar winglets. So again, lightly building up the blue. Not going too far with it. Now you may have noticed I've only got a couple of bits of masking tape down there. If you're new to this, I would suggest covering the whole wing because there is nothing, and I do mean there is nothing more infuriating than getting overspray. I've been doing this a little while. I am by no means a pro, but I can aim it in the right direction fairly well. So one of my favourite bits is demasking. As I said before in the previous episode, this is a bit of a two-edged sword. Sometimes it's absolutely awesome when you do it, and then sometimes you get a little bit of bleed. Well, you do if you're me, and you're screaming at at your own abilities. But with this one, I've got it down. It's all good. As you can see, nice clean edge, and we're happy with that. Excuse the toilet roll as the holder, but I find it doesn't scratch my kit, and I find it easy. Who thought there were so many rolls for a toilet roll? There you go. Anyway, the wingtips are done. So next up, it was doing the chrome leading edges. So as you can see, I've already masked this. A bit of loo roll behind, or toilet roll, or you can use kitchen roll, because it saves having to use the Tamiya tape. And also it means there's less sticky things dragging on your paint, if that makes sense. So done the rear horizontal stabs, and we've got the front wing, the wings all masked up, and then as you can see there, it was using Mr. Hobby number 8 silver. Now guys, I cannot rave and wax lyrical enough about Mr. Hobby silver number 8. It is, to me, it's the best silver out there. You obviously, if you're going to start going into your chromes, and you go your Yowclads, and I forget the company that does the other stuff in your chromes, but for silver, Mr. Hobby number 8 I find is pretty unbeatable. So there you go, it paints down and sprays down absolutely superbly. It's really, really good. So there we go, chrome leading edges, and you will also notice that the leading edges of the winglets are also painted as well, because the chrome work goes up there as well. So I'll fast forward this again, just so I don't bore you to absolute tears, and it's just a case of getting all the, methodically taking the masking tape away, and as always being extremely careful when using tweezers to do this, because you can chip your paint very, very easily indeed. Again, I've learned that the hard way. So whilst I'm here again, I'd just like to thank you very much for tuning in. You guys have been awesome. I'm at the 950 subscribers now, so if you haven't already, hit the like and subscribe. I'm sorry to plug it, but I really would be very, very humbled if I could make it over the 1,000 subscribers. So if you haven't already, hit the like and subscribe button, please. So there we go, showing the winglets nicely, the chrome work at the front there, and I'm pretty happy with the finish. So all of the masking tape is now removed, and you may notice there's a slight difference in the finish there. Now that wasn't an accident. I wanted it not to just be a plain boring silver. I wanted there to be a slight variation, as there would be on the real aircraft. A little bit of overspray there, which is highly annoying, so I'm gonna have to remask that and hit it up with a blue, but I did that off camera. It wasn't hard, but it was just one of those, oh damn it, one a bit annoying. That side's a bit cleaner. It's just one of those things, guys, but you can always just redo your work. It's not hard. There you go, the horizontal stabs as well, all nicely chromed up. Happy with that. So next up, we're a bit of a change of tack now. We're going to be doing the engines. So we've gone away from the fuselage, the wings, and now we're working on the engines. Now what I'm actually doing here is I've managed to find some old decal. I think it's off a 777 Dreamliner, and it had where the wing walk lines are, there was those decals floating around. Now what I happened to notice through my research is that the engines have a black line towards the fan blades, so I thought I would just use this instead of masking it up, which would be an absolute nightmare. So I just found an old decal, and as you can see here, it is fiddly as hell for something that is pretty much unnoticeable. But A, it was a bit of practice, and B, I know it's there and it's accurate. So make of that what you will. You can do this, you cannot do this. It's your kit, you do what you like. In hindsight, this was really fiddly, and I probably, if I'd known it was going to be that fiddly, may have got a bit lazy with it. I don't know. But I persevered, and we got both the engines done. It's just a case of methodically working this little wiggly snake around, and then you realise it's a little bit too long, and then you've got to pull the bit out and what's the word, trim it accordingly. As you can see here, just using a really sharp scalpel blade. It doesn't come away straight away. As you can see, it takes a little bit of coercing and teasing, but we get there eventually. As you can see there, really didn't want to let go. If you could hear the actual what's the word I'm looking for, the original audio of this, it probably would be a little bit blue, to be honest with you, because it was doing my head in. But this is what we do. It's all part of the fun of the hobby. We put ourselves through this. But I'm pretty happy with that now. I just get it lined up. 9 out of 10 people ain't even going to notice this. But there we go. I know it's there. It's like doing the interior of a tank, I suppose. Not anyone's going to see it, but you know it's there. Moving on from there, it was using again some oils thinned in white spirits. I'm not sure if I've shown you this on the first video, but I certainly will show you on the next part if you're not familiar. But it's just basically getting some oils, like, how do we describe this? Oil paints, there we go. Getting that thinned down with some white spirits, a sort of, I don't know, 20% oils to 80% thinners, white spirit, sorry, and then just dabbing it in there. What I find this does is this highlights any details, like you can see there in the actual center of the engine spinner there where the bolts go to hold that spinner on, and I wanted just to show that up. Again, probably not going to be seen, but I enjoyed it, and again it was a nice bit of sort of practice to keep myself fresh with this. And what you will also find when you're doing the blades is it gives a sort of bit of depth to them. The capillary action will draw out the oils, the darkness, and it just gives them a bit of depth rather than just being plain silver engine blades, which I really don't like. There are companies that do these in die cast and they just spray them silver and it's so depthless. I'm not saying mine's perfect, but at least it looks like there's sort of gaps between those blades. Well, I think they do anyhow. One thing with these is don't put the paint in on the inside. There's a little, I mean, it might be blatantly obvious, but I've done it on the outside there. Don't glue on the inside. Just allow the capillary action there to work its way round with the cement, and then you'll find as you look down into the engine fans you don't get any glue showing at all, which is what we want. Look, there we go, no glue showing, and it's stuck nicely, and you can see the black line, which I'm very happy about. I painted the intakes a buff colour because that's kind of what they are, and then just gave it a light dusting of silver just to give it that sort of chromy intake look. Now the eagle-eyed you again will notice I've painted the exhausts once my hands move out the way, and also the rear section of the engine. What I'm pointing out there is there are notches on the intake there that go in certain places on the actual engine cowling to make it fit correctly, so do double check you do that before you go to stick the engine cowlings together, because if you don't you're going to end in slight disaster, I'm afraid. It doesn't sit together well, I wouldn't have thought. Again, just using extra thin, allowing the capillary action to work, just dabbling that in there like so. You could, if you want to be a bit more accurate, just put it on the inside of the cowling and then just stick them together, but I didn't want any bits squidging out, so I'm happy with how that was. Then spectacularly dropping your work afterwards. Okay, next up, just putting the other side of the cowling on to complete the engine. What was slightly concerning here, as you can see, and I'm sort of investigating that while I'm going along, there was a little bit of a gap there between the cowling and the intake of the engine, but this is actually covered up by the front surface of the engine. That covers all of that up and actually centers it absolutely perfectly. There you go. As you can see, that covers it absolutely perfectly, and we've got one almost complete engine. Just got to stick that together. Getting a bit ahead of myself here. So sticking the cowlings together again was just using the excellent extra thin cement by Tamiya. Now for the top part of that, which we will get to shortly, I used some plastic weld. Now this is very, very similar to what you see in the tub in front of you here. It's just a bit stronger, and I use an actual paintbrush, as you will see shortly, to stick that together. Again, just a little hint, if you don't want to spill your glue, do the lid up and then you can't spill it over. So here is the previously mentioned plastic weld. I thought I'd describe it beforehand because then you can just sit and enjoy. Yeah, watch me using my stumpy paintbrush to get those bits together. Now what is good about this that I don't tend to find that the Tamiya cement does so well is when you push the seams to push the parts together, the plastic welds in between, it goes soft and he pushes up a beading, as you can just see there. Now what this does is it makes it a heck of a lot easier when you're sanding the top to get that, so that there's no join showing. It makes it a lot easier once it's all dried off just to sand that beading away and then rescribe it, rather than having to use filler. It actually, like it says on the tin, welds it together, pushes up the plastic and forms a really great seal. This was something that Zvezda have done. I don't know why they did this. They didn't just put the two halves of the engine pylon in half. They kind of allowed it so you can see one side instead of just putting them as two halves. I hope you can understand what I mean here, but why do that? you know, you've almost got a deep seam line there now, whereas it doesn't match the other side. Whereas if it had just been 2 straight bits of plastic, it would have been fine. Anyway, I'm harping on being a whinger. So next up was again the Mr. Hobby Blue number 5, and again, as I'm harping on a lot, this is just build it up with layers, don't blast it on, and just allow the colour to come together. And here I've just used a peg, of sort of metal peg, just as an extra, well, I don't have to get my hands on it basically, and just makes it easier to control. This can be quite time consuming, this part, building up the layers so slowly, but trust me, you will thank yourself later on. It keeps all the detail, keeps you in control, you don't get any runs, and it looks like how it looks how it should. I'm just constantly checking my work here just to make sure it's even, because this was quite a hard colour. Now you can see here there's different variations in the blue. Now that was really quite hard to pick up under the light, so I was just constantly checking to make sure I got a deep blue. Happy with the finish, just not happy with the depth of the blue there. Okay, once happy with the blue, it was time to paint the grey where the engine attaches to the pylon. So again, masking up. Now again, I'm pushing my luck slightly here with the amount of masking, but that comes with experience and time, or stupidity, depending how you want to look at it. I didn't get any overspray with that, but again guys, please, 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 if you're not confident, just cover the whole engine, because it saves having to do the blue again if you get overspray. I did not. Luck, judgment, don't know. Anyhow, just getting the grey down there nicely. Happy with that. And as you can see on the top there, you remember me saying about the glue, so you've got a no seam on the top there where it's holding, where the pylon for the engine is. There's no seam there at all, and that took very little sanding at all and just a little bit of rescribing to give it that solid effect. You wouldn't know that was 2 halves. Well, I hope you wouldn't anyway. Well, you guys do, because you've been watching this. There we are, happy with that. Nice solid grey, and then it's just a case of, I get quite impatient with this, I don't wait for it to dry before I take the masking off. Some others do, I don't. I prefer to get it while it's still sort of tacky. I find I get a nice crisp, I don't know, I just find I get a crisper edge with that than where it's dried. I don't know why that is, but it works for me. Along come the trusted tweezers to get the fiddly bits away, but again, please be ever so careful here, because trust me, these tweezers will chip paint in the blink of an eye. Do like that bit, quite satisfying. There you go. I didn't get away with it. A little, well, it's not overspray, it's underspray. It's where I didn't stick the Tamiya tape down. So there's a lesson for you guys. Make sure your tape stuck down. I had to respray that bit. I was not happy, but there we go. You've learned from my mistake. Now, I didn't record this. I'm not sure why. I don't know if there was an error with the camera. I can't remember. But so I used various, I think it was Alclads for this. Just using a couple of different chromes just to give it a variation. And if you actually look on the actual aircraft, you'll see that that is two-tone, that area. It's like a darker silver with a lighter silver. And it's just a case of, again, and you may have noticed there, I learnt my lesson from the overspray, so I completely covered the whole engine this time. Excuse the emergency vehicle going by as I'm recording this. So there we go, that's all the masking tape off now. So pretty happy with that. Again, a bit of overspray. I did struggle with this a little bit. See, I'm not perfect. I did struggle a little bit with this. There's a little bit of touch-up work later on. It didn't take long. It was more annoying than anything else. I just didn't stick down properly enough. I wasn't careful enough. So again, please learn from my mistakes, people. But there we go. Apart from the overspray marks, which I'm pointing out there, as you can see, very happy with the finish there. That is one engine done. And I will get those little quirky bits sorted out forsooth. Bearing in mind this is 1/144 scale, so these are quite small, as you can see. I'm quite happy with the end result. Next up, it is just a case of attaching the leading edge of the engine. Now, I didn't want to get any like glue spilling out the side, so I used the Revell Professional glue because it has that thin applicator. And then it's a case of lining up the marks. You can see that on the inside there of that leading edge, and then just finding where it goes, and it just clips into place. He said confidently, but this is why I use this glue. It's slower drying, and I've used it sparingly so as it wouldn't spill out the side. But as you can see, this was quite fiddly, so do take your time with this. There she goes, straight in spot, in position, and it's just a case of pressing that down. In fact, I think I ended up pushing it straight down on there and leaving it like that for 10 minutes just so it would stick in position. State of my hands in that. This was really fiddly, and I must admit engines are one of my least favourite parts of doing airliners. I'll give it a little bit more attention off camera. Right guys, it's time for me to go. So I hope you've enjoyed the video so far, well, the series so far. Click the like and subscribe. There you have two beautiful looking engines, and here is a photo of the actual aircraft, so you can compare what I'm doing with what's on here. So until next time, there will be a part 3 of this, and then we've got the F4 going after that, so do tune in for those. I wish you a good week, happy modelling, and take care of yourselves, and most of all, be safe. Take care, speak soon, thanks again.